NHTV and the Hamden-North Haven League of Women Voters present the 2014 Candidates Forum. The two candidates for state representative in the 87th District are Republican incumbent Dave Yaccarino and Democratic challenger Alden Mead. Questions in this forum were developed by a committee of the Hamden-North Haven League.
Hello, I'm Teale Caliendo, NHTV. A coin toss earlier this evening determined Alden Mead will go first with his opening statement, which is limited to 3 minutes. Candidate Mead will also be the first person to answer the first question. After that, the candidates will alternate. 9 questions will be asked this evening. The format for the questions will be as follows. Mr. Mead will have 1.5 minutes, 90 seconds to answer. Then Dave Yaccarino will have 2.5 minutes or 150 seconds for a reply. And then we will have Alden Mead again with 1 minute of rebuttal. Closing statements are also going to be limited to 3 minutes each. And the order of the presentation for the ending will be the same as with the opening statements. Democratic Party candidate Alden Mead will now give his opening statement. Mr. Mead.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity given to Dave and to me by the League of Women Voters, because I don't think people always realize, and it's important to me, that women have only had the right to vote for less than 100 years, since 1920, since the 19th Amendment. And it's so important that the League of Women Voters formed in 1919 had to do with it. And I just think of it in terms of real terms, that my mother, for example, who is still alive, was born at a time when she was a second-class citizen and couldn't really have the franchise to vote. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. That makes it quite a privilege to be here. For me, about myself personally, I'm Alden Mead. I'm one of the 2 candidates for state representative, and so you know something about me. I was born one of 5 children. My dad was a police officer and my mom was a housewife who worked part-time. I've had many varied life experiences. I've been a soldier in Vietnam, a police officer, a surgical technician, a medical research running laboratories at Yale for a number of years. I was actually a medical practice consultant, and I was also the co-director of the Yale University Marine Mammal Stranding Center for whales, so I worked all around the world with whales and with the government. I'm also currently an assistant clinical professor at the Yale Medical School, and most recently, for a number of years, I've been the CEO of a small business. I also, through these ventures, worked for a charity around the world internationally, and in quite a large number of countries. And during this time, I also had an academic background that grew along with my real life experiences until I finished and graduated from the UConn Law School. So I've been lucky enough to have a number of varied life experiences. And I moved to North Haven in 1992. And I'm fortunate to find myself in this position to be able to ask you to consider me to be North Haven's representative in the General Assembly, where frankly, I don't plan to be ordinary. I hope to give you a powerful, independent, effective voice to examine the legislative recipe that goes on in Hartford, to stir the pot if necessary a bit, and to bring home the bacon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mead. And now Republican Party candidate Dave Yaccarino will give his opening statement. Mr. Yaccarino.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Dave Yaccarino. I've been honored to be your state representative for the last 4 years. First, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank NHTV this evening, the League of Women Voters for doing such a wonderful job, Teale Caliendo, my opponent, and most of all, the citizens of North Haven, Connecticut. North Haven has always been my home. I've raised my 3 children here, David, Joseph, and Carolyn, all attending North Haven Public Schools. I've run a small family business for the last 23 years here at North Haven DJs. Before DJs, I was part of a local family business, North Haven Exxon, with my older brother, Lou, and my dad. I've been around local family business my adult life. I learned the value of hard work and dedication and commitment. I've also served 4 years in the United States Navy Reserve. I was a Boy Scout leader for many years here in North Haven, coached Max Anyway baseball, girls softball. I was a volunteer and a youth group mentor at St. Francis Cabrini Church many years ago. I say this because it's who I am. I've run a family business. I've raised 3 children, putting them through college. All of life challenges have made me the person I am today, and I truly understand the struggles of all of us. That has made me a better person today and a better state representative. As your state representative, I work very hard, and I should work hard for you. I've always listened to my fellow citizens. I've made myself accessible, holding office hours, or meeting people one-on-one whenever necessary. At my time up in the Capitol, I've had a 100% voting record over the last 4 years representing North Haven. I've done my best to be involved in the community and provide the best constituent services possible. I've been and will be totally committed to the town of North Haven. I always put North Haven first. A state representative's job is to represent all people, always striving to do the most good for the most people and being honest about it. I've been extremely honored to be your state representative. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity and thank the people helping tonight for the opportunity for this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the first question, which will go originally to Mr. Mead and then Mr. Yaccarino, and then we will come back for a rebuttal from Mr. Mead. This is your first question. Please describe to an 18-year-old, a new voter, the responsibilities of a state representative.
Okay, I have to first say that an 18-year-old new voter, I don't presume, knows so little sometimes that they're fresh out of school and they might actually know quite a bit. And they're able to be in the service, they're able to vote. So, but I do know it's a new system in real life for them. And I think what I might explain is that as opposed to a state senator, of course there's 2 legislative houses in Connecticut, a state senator represents a larger group of interests and a number of towns, whereas a state representative in this case represents a smaller number of people, and in this case represents North Haven. So for example, if you wanted to build a playground and the state senator had an interest in it, they might have to be concerned about, well, Wallingford might want it, and they're all competing for a bit of the same pie, very aggressively perhaps, whereas the state representative would really be looking for North Haven's benefit only. So that's one of the issues. I also think that one has to realize that the state representative not only represents the town, but they represent the town in the state legislature, so as to be that person, that incorporation of everyone who's one of their constituents in the state legislature to make laws, of course. And that's my answer. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now the same question to you, Mr. Yaccarino. Please describe to an 18-year-old, to a new voter, the responsibilities of a state representative.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. There are many responsibilities of a state representative. First, you uphold the oath of office of Connecticut. You listen to constituents' needs and bring them to the state capitol, try to solve their problems and address them. You fight for funding and state resources to help the town, and I've been fortunate enough to do that over the last 4 years. You introduce legislation. Then you have the committee process. We all serve on joint committees, Senate and Representatives, Democrats, Republicans. One of the most important processes is the public hearing process, where you hear the pros and cons of all potential legislation. And in this, you make the determination, and then you vote through the process. I've never missed a public hearing. And then after the committee process and the public hearing process, then you vote on legislation in the House or the Senate, respective houses. I believe in a bipartisan approach is the best approach when it comes to committee process. That's where you have the best legislation. So you want to work together. It's very important to have strong constituent services. You're representing people, and in my case, you represent about 25,000 people in North Haven, Connecticut. And you have to work hard and be dedicated to that job. Hold office hours, listen to people, listen to their concerns. It's very important. And then you're involved in the community, either scouting events, Little League, girls softball or softball. You go to businesses and you visit businesses to try to hear their plight, what they need, what we could try to help them with up the state capitol. It's really you present citations and other awards, but it's considered a part-time job, but it's really a full-time commitment, and it's really a full-time job, and I've been honored to do that, and I'd like to thank you.
Mr. Mead, if you wish, you have 60 seconds for a rebuttal.
Sure. It's hard to rebut the accuracy of what Dave said, because it's very clear, and I think we were just complimentary in what we said about the responsibilities of the job. So I'd only say in my own case, I'd bring a very broad experience to the job. I've had a background, obviously, in medicine, business, law, finance. I've been the CEO of a small business until recently, and also science and technology. So those are how I think I can help, because each candidate, of course, has to have the motivation, the capabilities, and exercise the skills that serve the constituents in a responsible way. Thank you.
And that sort of leads us into our second question, which will go first to Dave Yaccarino. One of you would bring experience on the job, and the other one of you would bring a fresh approach. Both are valuable, but what would be better for North Haven at this time? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Yaccarino.
Thank you for that question. I've been looking at this question over and over. I believe I actually bring experience for the last 4 years and a fresh approach to the office. First, I'll say experience. I've been the state representative for 4 years. I've become ranking member in the Republican Veterans Committee, and I serve on 3 other committees, plus the Bipartisan Sportsman's Caucus, which promotes outdoor activity, hunting and fishing. I've been appointed by the governor to be the co-chair of the Connecticut Veterans Hall of Fame Committee. I have a very strong bipartisan record over the last 4 years. People could talk about that, but I've really proven it in Hartford, which I've got a lot done for North Haven through that. Experienced tough budget votes and just many different votes. Even though I am the incumbent, from my point of view, I do things much differently. I bring a fresh approach to the legislature. I listen to everybody. I listen to all views. My local campaign manager in my re-election committee is made up of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And my campaign manager is actually a Democrat. I come from a working background. I bring a common sense approach to the job. I work very hard in the community, and so I think at this time, I feel I'm the best candidate because I do bring 4 years of experience and a fresh approach as far as how I approach the job and the people of the community. So thank you.
Thank you. And now candidate Mead.
Well, when it comes to a choice between what is better, experience or a fresh approach, I don't think either one is better than the other one. I think it depends on the quantity and the quality of each. That's sort of like saying what's better, gold or silver. How much gold? How much silver? What's the alloy? So I'm really finding it difficult, because I think really what someone needs to bring, as Dave says, are both qualities to the job. I certainly think that if I was elected, I realize I won't know where to park the car or where to get lunch or understand some of the procedures, but we all each start every challenge, and I have many times as a newcomer. So I have a proven track record of successfully taking on many new challenges, and I'm a pretty fast study, and I think I would be very good at doing that in this case. But also experience can be a foundation, or it can be an anchor. And so I think depending on the person who uses it, and that's not to say Dave is by any means an anchor. He's, uses his experience well, I think. And I do have relevant experience from working in small business, working very much internationally, bringing people together to get projects done. And so I bring a lot of experience. I've been to law school, and I know the legislative process in an academic way. I've worked with the government, so I know it in a realistic way, a real life way. And I think I also bring clearly a fresh outlook to what would be the job as state representative. And I certainly think that a fresh outlook is really one that should be called almost a refreshed outlook all the time. Nobody has ever thought of me as somebody who's not constantly renewed, to an extreme way, I suppose, in some people's view. I saw a sign that I thought was relevant to this when I was thinking of this the other day on the Moonrise Cafe shelf just down Washington Avenue, a couple of blocks away. And I was thinking about this, and I thought it was a very appropriate sign about the importance of an ever fresh look, because it had to do with life generally, but it applies here too. And it read, "You were born an original. Don't become a copy." Thank you.
Thank you very much. And would you like to follow that at all, Mr. Yaccarino?
Oh, no, I actually, well, yes, I do, but I do agree with Mr. Mead in one aspect. It doesn't matter fresh approach or experience. But my record has proven that I've been there only a short 4 years, but I do bring a fresh approach because my accessibility to the town. I listen to all different views. And one of the most important jobs as a legislator is listening. Too often in Hartford, that's how we get in trouble in Hartford too often. We think we know everything. And I've proven from my life experience, from raising a family, and my job over the last 4 years that I do listen and I do get things done. So I have some experience, but I constantly learn and I constantly listen. And the best legislator, I believe, is somebody that listens and acts on that and just always strives to do the most good for the most people and thinks of other people more than themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, question number 3, which will go first to candidate Alden Mead. This might take a little longer because the question is, what would you identify as the most pressing issues facing Connecticut, and how would you address them? Mr. Mead.
Thank you. The most important issues clearly facing Connecticut are jobs and the economy. In general, throughout the United States, according to the Wall Street Journal this past August recently, 2/3 of the states have still not recovered to the job levels they had when the recession came. Yet here in Connecticut, we have recovered 75% of our private sector's jobs that were lost during the recession, and we've had 7 straight months of private sector growth. For example, in August, there were 400 new jobs created in the private sector, and I know that's not the same as the public sector, because similarly, we only had a 60% growth of jobs overall. And so that's really an indication that we're going in the right direction. Government is shrinking and the private sector is expanding. So I strongly believe in those kinds of things are growing in a good way. And I strongly believe in efforts, for example, like C. Cowell's coming to North Haven and bringing Jackson Labs to Connecticut and keeping United Technologies here. So I think we have to continue to invest in the infrastructure, and my time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Republican Party candidate David Yaccarino, what would you identify as the most pressing issues facing Connecticut, and how would you address them?
Thank you. Thank you. When I speak to people about the issues that concern them, when I go to the door, if I have office hours, the most important issues are high unemployment, lack of jobs, and high taxes in Connecticut. First, jobs. We need to cut the red tape and streamline the permitting process in Hartford. It's much too long and much too cumbersome for people to open business and expand. We need to continue to invest in education, especially in technical job training, colleges with technical skills, and veterans programs, which I'm proud that I've been co-sponsor of some of those programs. Manufacturing, construction jobs are the key to, I think, moving our economy forward in Connecticut. For every manufacturing or construction job, 4 more jobs are created because they're high-paying, sustainable jobs. I am proud to have co-sponsored the United Technologies Sikorsky's bill to retain workers and actually expand the companies throughout the state, and also build some construction with that. When you look at businesses, you have to look at the approach, how we've taken it. And we really need to listen to them more. I visit companies and they complain all too often that legislators feel that they always feel we're putting higher energy costs on them, more regulations, and more restrictions. We need to listen to them and to expand. Taxes, which hurt so many people. 4 years ago, our state legislature and our governor had a $2.9 billion tax increase, which hurt so many people. New consumption taxes, raising the sales tax for the first time. Clothing and footwear tax that have never been taxed under $75 tax now. The non-prescription drug tax that hurts all people. We really need to look at our tax structures. Connecticut has the highest gasoline tax in New England by 22 cents a gallon. I put a bill in last year to at least study the effects of lowering the gas price, tax rather, 4 cents per year. It was never called, but I will continue to try to fight for that. But we really need, what it comes down to is we need to work together, listen to companies, listen to people, and enact the right policies. We have not done it. I disagree with Mr. Mead. Our state economy is not doing well. Our jobs are not growing. We had some good months, but we've actually had some bad months after. We're one of the worst economies in the country still. I hear it from time to time. I see it when I go to homes, how they're deteriorated compared to 4 years ago. Saying that, we really need to work together for the betterment of all people. Thank you.
Thank you. And now a 60-second rebuttal from Alden Mead.
Okay. Well, of course, I disagree and find that the economy is moving in the right direction from my perspective and needs to continue to move strongly and fast. There's been more economic assistance, for example, given to small business in Connecticut over the past 2 years than there were in the previous 6 years. And we need to keep moving forward and continue from the recovery from the really the worst crisis since the Great Depression. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now question number 4, which will go first to Dave Yaccarino. The question is, both candidates for governor support reinstating highway tolls in Connecticut. What is your position on this issue?
Thank you. My position today is to leave it as is. When I hold office hours, when I listen to people again, the majority of North Haven residents are against tolls. Currently, Connecticut receives $500 million per year from the federal government for us not having tolls. Estimates show that we'll lose that money if we try to implement tolls. I believe it's just another tax on our taxpayers, and at this current time, I would leave it the way it is. Like I said, we get $500 million from the federal government. We've had money, this administration and prior administrations sweep the money from the transportation fund for roads and bridges. That should stop, but you can't enact tolls because somebody's doing something wrong. We're getting $500 million from the federal government, and I would leave it as it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Alden, Mead, how do you feel about that question? Reinstating the tolls on Connecticut's highways.
Okay. I think the way the question was phrased was that both candidates for governor support reinstating the tolls.
Correct.
And I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
I think that both candidates for governor have considered the possibility of reinstating the tolls, but neither one has expressed a positive, strong desire, nor do I. But I did look into, there was a 2009 study about the tolls, and I think just something to consider if they are going in that direction is that in that study, and I'm not sure about losing the $500 million, and I'm not well versed enough to be able to say clearly that would be the case. And I'd like to look at that. But I know that that study said that from I-95 alone, there would be an excess and the minimum of $100 million, probably more, probably maybe double that, from tolls on 95. And for example, $70 million from I-84 in a year. And the electronic system wouldn't really cause braking and slow down pollution. And I think that's probably what the gubernatorial candidates have been considering and thinking about, and I'd like to keep an open mind about it as long as the possibility of reinstituting tolls also was a tool to lower the gas tax. So also it was a tool perhaps not to have to take money from the transportation fund. But I have to say also in general, I think the net amount spent on transportation may be more money than it appears, because accounting is a crazy thing in private and in government life, and it may be the transportation fund is actually giving money to non-transportation issues, but it may be that the general fund is contributing to some transportation issues, such as the new railroad station proposed in North Haven. So when it comes to accounting, I'm very careful to really look at the numbers and not how they're moved around. I worked in Italy a couple of years, and there was a saying there, and forgive my Italian, but it was something like arithmetica non opinione. Arithmetic is not an opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Yaccarino, would you like a rebuttal time?
Thank you. Just a few points. We do get $500 million today. That's the current number from the federal government. The fact is, over the last 4 years, and I wasn't there prior to that, but I know money was swept. Almost $250 million was swept from the general fund, from the transportation fund, rather through the gas tax and transportation money, put into the general fund, because we didn't have a balanced budget, and that money was used not for roads and bridges where it was intended, but to be put in the general fund. So I'd be wary of this. You always want to keep an open mind, see what happens on the future, but right now I would be definitely opposed to it. And Mr. Mead is right. Both gubernatorial candidates, they're just speculating. I think a lot of it's posturing. But the fact is, our governor has the votes. He could have passed us already, and he knows we're getting $500 million, and it'd be a wash for the Connecticut. And I think it would cause more congestion. Thank you.
We continue our forum with our two candidates for state representative for the 87th district. The candidates are Republican incumbent Dave Yaccarino, and Democratic challenger Alden Mead. Questions in this forum were developed by committee of the Hamden-North Haven League. Question number 5. This will first go to Alden Mead. When Connecticut voters go to the polls in November, there will be a ballot question to amend the state constitution. This amendment would give legislators permission to make changes to our voting laws. What is your position on this issue?
I support voting yes to amend the Constitution. I strongly support it. And that would amend the Constitution in a way that would not set regulations about how voting would occur, but it would just allow it to go to the legislature, as I understand. I think my opponent probably feels oppositely because I believe he voted against the legislation that would allow this to go before the voters. Certainly the intent and the effect of this particular amendment is to remove hurdles and increase the number of those who do vote. I don't see a negative issue with increasing access to the polls, and I don't see how there ever can be too many voters, and I don't see how there could ever be too much democracy. Nationwide, nearly 25% of voters of the total American electorate, actually 32 million citizens already vote early. What this would allow the legislature to do would be to have voting early in Connecticut, and there's quite a number of states, actually 27 states that mail absentee ballots to people just on request. There's 33 states that just permit early voting. And so I agree with that. I think this is clearly an issue where voting for this amendment is also voting yes for seniors. It's voting yes for students. It's voting yes for commuters and busy parents. So thank you.
Mr. Yaccarino, would you like to tell us your opinion on the ballot question to amend the state constitution?
I would like to give my opinion. I did vote against the bill in the legislature last year, but I did vote yes for the amendment striking section 2 and 3. I believe strongly in no excuse. What this bill is, and this amendment is no excuse early voting. We already have early voting, but what happens is a reason I oppose this amendment, is because section 2 and 3 it leaves it open-ended. And the state you're referencing, it's not open-ended, it's closed. In this case, if it passes, you could vote through the internet. There's no restrictions if you could vote through the internet or not into internet. Any form, it says alternative forms of voting. And that's dangerous. We've had hacking in Target. We've had hacking through old banking. So I'm all for early voting. I'm all for the most participation as possible. I believe in democracy. But this bill was poorly written. And this is a major amendment. And I would love for early voting. I think we both support that. But the fact is that section 2 and 3 should have been struck out. I supported the amendment, striking those amendments out, just closing it. And veterans, we tried to do the same thing. The Secretary of State is against this because it's hard to declare if somebody votes through the internet. And that's what's going to happen down the road, and it's very dangerous. So I did oppose it. Sadly, I did oppose it because it went much too far. I would love to see the most participation as possible. We all want that. That's our precious right as Americans. But this was a really poorly written bill, and it's going to be a poor amendment. I would hope, if it does pass, that somehow we could close that sections 2 and 3. Then I would support it 100%. Right now, it's not. It's an open-ended. It's an open-ended amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Mead, your rebuttal.
Sure. The way I understood it was that voting yes would merely change the language and make it more open in the Constitution, amending the Constitution, so that then the legislature could have the opportunity to make laws. It wouldn't be open to fraud. I think fraud's a small issue. I just think that democracy at any level should not be about obstacles that make it difficult to vote, but rather about creating and employing the least restrictive process. I think each person's vote is such a jewel that somebody else generally fought for them to have, and they sacrifice for, that everybody ought to be allowed to take that jewel, which is their precious gift, and put it in the treasure chest, which is the ballot box of democracy.
And Mr. Yaccarino?
Can I just get 5
Sure.
seconds? I'd like to make it very clear. I support early, no excuse absentee voting. We have that now up to a certain point, but this goes much further than that. When you put an amendment out, it's serious. You can't put an open-ended amendment. This is amending the Constitution of Connecticut. And there's no guarantee that my friends on the other side are going to change that amendment next year. This is going to be the law when it's voted on. So I would have, if those sections were struck out, I would have supported it 100%, but it's too open-ended. And other states don't have those open-ended amendments.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
On question number 6, which will go first to you, Mr. Yaccarino, some of this was touched on earlier. Connecticut has a reputation of not being business friendly. What changes would improve the state's business climate?
Thank you very much for that question. You hear over and over from people in Connecticut that our climate is too top-heavy. There's too much red tape. The regulatory system is overloaded and duplicated. The cost of doing business is much too high. The unemployment tax, not just for the basic unemployment, but Connecticut has a special assessment on unemployment because we borrowed money from the federal government in 2009, and every employer has to pay approximately $47.50 per employee every quarter. So that's very expensive. The high energy costs that our governor imposed 2.5% on our generation costs a few years ago, that really hurts the business climate. But we have to change our culture. We need to be more business friendly. Listen to companies. It's very important. It's all our jobs. Jobs cure many, many ills, and we need to be more open, more business friendly, and approach business like customer service, like you would want or I would want going to a store. The permitting process is much too long. The communication process, there's so much duplication. I've heard testimony where people want to open businesses and they don't get an answer sometimes for 90 days. I believe in having a liaison. We have people that could do that now, a liaison for like a business liaison to follow up for companies that are trying to get permitting processes and see how they're doing. We do that with DECD. They do a pretty good job, but we need to continue to do that. Thank you.
And now, Mr. Mead, what would you do to improve the state's business climate?
Well, as a former CEO of a successful small business, for a number of years prior to this, and during the recession as well, I know that the greatest expenses after payroll are things like medical and other insurances, energy costs, transportation. There are a mix of things that have to do with the private sector and the government. I think improvements are being made to the medical insurance costs through for example, small business health options, the shop in Connecticut that the government runs to allow access to better, more competitive health insurance rates. I know that the CBIA program, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association program that I have worked with, has an access health that also has some great success in the past in this area. I think job creation through tax credits for veterans, people who hire veterans, and the unemployed or the disabled are an excellent idea to continue and perhaps pursue even more. I think it seems like a small thing, but to eliminate the business entity tax of $250 that costs more to collect probably than the value of it when it gets to the government coffers. I think small business express loans at low interest rates. I think infrastructure investment for transportation and shipping is crucial. I think it never hurts to look at what might be burdensome regulations and see if they can be more efficient. I did run a business and I know simple is better. I never hear people talk so much about the taxes that they pay, funny enough, when I talk to business associates or at the door, as sometimes they talk about the process of it being a little bit difficult to figure out to pay their taxes. The same is true that I know unemployment is hard to figure out, and workers' comp, which is from insurance companies, is also an issue. Just to understand those things, and I think they might be made more clear, or there might be a better way for people to be trained to understand them. So thank you.
And Mr. Yaccarino, your rebuttal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Speaking of the CBI, I was endorsed actually by the CBIA, National Federation of Independent Small Businesses, but that doesn't help the economy or doesn't help our business-friendly state. But we need to continue to look at the regulatory system. I put a bill in last year, many legislators did, including our governor, to streamline the regulatory process and sunset some of the regulations. We have regulations that are duplicated and they go back 50 or 60 years. That's why I said earlier about the communication. We have a communication system in Connecticut that's about 30 years old, and it doesn't keep up to the times as far as Agency B speaking to Agency A and Agency C. It's too important. We need strong customer service. We need to have strong, clear regulatory system, a clear permitting process. We do have the DCD and the Small Business Express, but it doesn't extend far enough out to enough businesses. We need to somehow, and this is the private sector, having liquidity in the small local banks. But again, as this legislative process, Democrats and Republicans truly have to work together to many times stay out of the way of business, let people do business.
Thank you.
And thrive.
Thank you very much. Now, question number 7, and this will go first to Alden Mead. Connecticut is ranked as a difficult state economically for retirees. How could the state assist retirees who are economically depressed?
Well, first, I think this is really, of course, a seniors question because there aren't too many young retirees. And so I think this is a seniors question about seniors who are not currently working. I'm a senior also, and currently, unless I have some good fortune on November 1st, I'm also a retiree at the moment. My mom's also a senior and well into her 90s. But anyway, so how can we help seniors? A very large number of whom are economically depressed or on their way to becoming economically depressed as their dollars become less valuable over time. Just some few ideas I had are Florida, for example, does not charge seniors an automobile tax. Connecticut has a circuit breaker program, but I think we could raise the thresholds of what's required before you can pay less property tax. In other words, it's about $39,000 if you're married, $32,000, I believe, if you're single. Some towns take advantage of a tax freeze program that was set up in the 70s, but it's really been on hold, as I understand it, for applications since '79. I think there are homestead exemptions in some states where if you lived in your home and you're a senior for, say, 15, 20, 25 years, that's useful also. And we could consider instituting something like that in Connecticut. I think also it's worth a thought about if there would be a tax credit on income tax for seniors so that they could deduct a portion of their property tax from their income tax. Or how about a standard exemption for seniors based on age? Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Dave Yaccarino, the same question to you. How can the state assist retirees?
Thank you very much. When you go to door and you listen to seniors and you speak to seniors, you hear over and over how expensive it is to live in Connecticut. And the sad reality is it's true. First, we have to acknowledge seniors are all different ages, from the early 60s to 85 or 90, hopefully even 100. I would like to eliminate the state tax on pensions and Social Security benefits. They've already paid tax on that money. I think we owe it to our seniors to eliminate that tax. I'd like to see once and for all to remove the non-prescription drug tax that was imposed 4 years ago. I think it hurts all people, especially seniors on fixed income. They're buying non-prescription over-the-counter drugs, and they pay tax on all those for the first time ever. Obviously, I've been saying it all night, try to continue to lower the gas tax in Connecticut. It's so high, and if you're driving, it's expensive to drive from point A to B. And it adds up. It hurts your food costs, it hurts your heating costs. Make permanent, we just put this back in the budget last year, and I've worked very hard on this, the rental assistance for qualifying seniors, to give them assistance with their renting, continue our heating assistance program that helps all people, especially seniors on a fixed income. It's very important. The bottom line is the cost of living in Connecticut is much too high. Between property tax, sales tax, income tax, it just adds up. Food costs because of the high gasoline taxes. We do have the municipal option for freezing taxes, but by the time that option's set in place, the property taxes are so high now because of all the mistakes that are made up in Hartford. So we really need to look at the costs of living, continue to some of these programs we started, but try to rid that income tax on the Social Security and benefits and pension benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mead.
Great. I think some of the ideas I mentioned earlier and some of what Dave has mentioned, but especially what I mentioned earlier, bring to light that all seniors are not the same age. And I have this discussion all the time at doors and at the senior center recently. Obviously, if a senior is a youngish senior like myself, and maybe I'm not that youngish anymore, the dollars that they have today are more valuable than somebody who's farther removed and getting less, and it's worth less, who might be 85 years old. So I think it's amazing that we look at younger people in age categories where we differentiate them and the benefits they get or the considerations and understanding they get based on various categories of age, but we don't do it with an obvious parallel group with seniors. And obviously seniors who are 85 don't put out as much garbage and they don't use the road as seniors who are less young, and I think that's to be taken into consideration in taxing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 8. This will go first to Mr. Yaccarino. Would you propose changes in the education cost-sharing formula, and if so, what would they be?
Thank you very much. I'd love to see the formula change as far as benefiting the greater good, but let me go into the current formula first. The current formula, when originally built, had good intentions, but it's become much too complex, and it picks too many winners and losers, and it has not been fair to North Haven. 2 years ago, there was a study up in Hartford by non-legislators, people in the education field, business people, retired people, and it showed that the formula is not fair. It picks too many winners and losers. It hurts actually towns like North Haven, like I said. But the honest answer is there's no desire from the majority party, the Democratic Party, and the governor and the cities to change the formula because it really benefits the cities. I would prefer something more streamlined that would have a baseline of about $1,000 per student, and then you have the factors in, which are now Husky, poverty, wealth, food plans. I think that'll be fair. The good thing is that North Haven has benefited almost $670,000 over the last 4 years. I fought very hard. I put a bill in the first year. Didn't go anywhere because, like I said, there's no desire to push the ECS to change. But I brought back $670,000 over 4 years. It's more money we brought back in many, many years prior. I'm very proud of that. I worked alongside Senator Vezzano. We worked very hard for the education system in North Haven. But the honest answer is there's no will in the majority party to make the proper changes because it will hurt the cities more than it would help towns like North Haven. Thank you.
And to you now, Mr. Mead, would you propose changes in the education cost-sharing formula, and if so, what would they be?
Yes, I would propose changes to the education formula. It's ECS. I think it's probably very confusing to most people to understand what that is, but it's the amount of money, of course, that we get to supplement the budget that we use for education. And the formula that decides how much we get, of course, is based on the number of students we have. That's pretty easy. Then it gets a little more complex because it's based on the students' needs, and that gets a little more difficult because there's sub-formulas. And then it's based on the wealth of the town, and that becomes even more difficult because the factors that are used are not necessarily timely. That all becomes a moot point, though, because really it's underfunded on top of that, and it needs to be fully funded for it to be effective if it's to stay the same way. But in addition to that, it's been frozen, is my understanding, for quite some time. So I'm not sure, and I'd like to give Dave an opportunity to explain that, but I thought that the amount of money that we've really got in recent times had not changed significantly over the last number of years. When I look, it looked like we got $3,175,000, $3,200,000. So I'm looking into this, I'm new to this, but I've become quite well versed about the mechanism of the ECS, or the Educational Cost Sharing Formula. And I'd like to not pick so much winners or losers also. I'd like to be a state representative that makes North Haven a winner. And so I think there needs to be a revamping probably of the whole structure of the ECS. There also needs to be full funding, whatever that might be, whatever the formula might be in the end. And I think it's a huge architectural change. And it, of course, has to be no longer frozen. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Yaccarino, your rebuttal.
Thank you very much. I'm a strong proponent of funding education to the most money as possible when it's spent properly. And I'm an advocate of early childhood funding of education. The fact is, it was frozen, but North Haven and many towns, not all towns, we applied for more money. Myself and Senator Vezzano, we received $670,000 more in the last 4 years. I think received almost $13 million last year. I can't remember the exact number, but it was $670,000 extra. Education is key to me. I've been endorsed by the CEA and North Haven Education Group. I'm a strong believer in fundamental education. I wrote an article about poverty and hunger in early childhood education. But back to ECS, it should be fully funded. A good portion of the money does go to the cities, unfortunately, and they need it in many cases. But it's not fair. It's like a block grant or a streamlined method where you start at a base of $1,000 per student. North Haven gets approximately $980 a student now. And then you build off that with the poverty, the meal programs. So the $1,000 base and up, but we've got $670,000 over the last 4 years additional dollars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our final question. This will go first to Democratic Party candidate Alden Mead. The General Assembly is dominated by one party from the point of view of North Haven and the point of view of the state. Is it better to have a state representative who is of the minority or the majority party? First to Mr. Mead.
Well, I think it's probably better to have the Democrat. No. But first is that from the point, now that's a funny question, because first from the point of view of the town, perhaps a representative from the majority party can no doubt have some advantage of having more likely votes to support their agenda on behalf of the town. That's the probability. I'm not saying it's true in any particular instance, but that's the probability in the way you would answer this question. Because their own party is obviously going to give them results that might be more beneficial to the town, its resources, its interests. But secondly, is from the point of view of the state, it's never good to have such a majority that it defeats the purpose of a two-party system by having too much of one perspective without the healthy dialogue and circumspect thought and exchange of ideas necessary. But more importantly than whether someone is from the majority or the minority party is really, particularly when it's in the state interest, is that the party is not as important as the person, as long as the person is themselves strong. I think an independent person, one that is their own man or their own woman, will represent the best interest of all constituents, unfettered by blind allegiance to their own party or stubborn resolve against the opposing party at the expense of logic and at the expense of the best interests of the state or the town. Again, the party is important, but an independent character is paramount. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the same question to you, Mr. Yaccarino. The General Assembly is dominated by one party from the point of view of North Haven and from the point of view of the state. Is it better to have a representative of the minority or the majority party?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, it is dominated in Hartford by almost 2-to-1 Democrats to Republicans, but it shouldn't matter whether if your town is represented by minority party or majority party. Solely caring about what party a given representative is from is harmful, and it hurts our culture, and it causes a partisan culture, which is destroying American politics. Best laws come from both sides listen to each other. Compromise is nearly impossible, though, when you have the legislature that is a single majority. I've been able to work successfully with the majority party because they recognize I negotiate in good faith. I'm not a hardline voter, and I'm honest and I'm open to all ideas as long as it's beneficial to people in general, especially in North Haven. Regardless of your party, you must represent everybody in your town for the right reasons. You must apply common sense to all problems and reflect all the interests is what you do for your town of North Haven. You must always have the intent of doing the most good for the most people. I know I say that all the time, but that's my belief, that's my motto. Always do the most good for the most people, no matter what party you're from. You represent people, not a party. So even though I'm in the minority party, I've been able to bring quite a bit of money back to the town. I've said it all night. I don't know if I have to get into it, but I've done quite a bit. I'm proud of that. But I'm more proud that I work across party lines to get things done for the town of North Haven. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Mead, your rebuttal.
Well, I have to agree. I don't like to think that the party, whether it's the minority or the majority, even though people have told me, oh, you'll be able to get more done, I discount that. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but I think it's about the person. And I'd like, in this candidacy, for it to be about the person. I think we have two good, decent people, and you have to choose by comparison which you'd like to vote for. Thanks.
It is now time for the candidates to give their closing statements. Democratic Party candidate Alden Mead will now give his closing statement. Mr. Mead.
Okay. I'd like my closing statement really to be about voting. It's something that's really personal, and I have a personal message about it. I think that's more important than what I could say about myself in closing. I think when I first started this campaign for myself, it was just about making sure there's a two-party system with two good candidates running and a good choice for the citizens and an opportunity for the most people, hopefully more people than ever, to vote for all good reasons. I think everybody remembers back that there's a high price somebody paid, a high cost for us to be able to vote. The American Revolution was only a couple hundred years ago to or a bit more. And before that, we had no representation. People died, gave up their farms, their families, their lives in order to be able to have us vote. So we throw all that away if we don't use the vote. And the Civil War was fought, and as a result of it, we had an amendment that allowed people of color and minorities to vote, and people, regardless, as the language read, regardless of their previous status of enslavement. And then from the Civil War to the 1920, we had the issue of women who suffered greatly in order to try and get the vote. Can you imagine? Half the country approximately didn't have an opportunity to vote. All those people suffered for that, not to mention all the wars that we have fought through this country to maintain democracy and the right to vote. So I just like for everybody to come out and use their vote. I think whether, you have immigrant families from years ago, grandparents who came here, and I'll tell you, when I knock on the door of somebody who immigrated here recently, first generation, and they're a citizen, they're so proud and so happy to vote, and they feel it's so powerful. So probably did your grandparents or their parents before that. So if you immigrated here somewhere, and we all did except for very few, how can you not vote? If you're a woman, how can you not vote? If you're a veteran, how can you not vote? If you're a minority, how can you not vote? I feel so strongly about this. For my own touchstone in my own generation, I go to the wall on occasion. It's tough in Washington, and I can look at the names, and there's about 50,000 people there plus who I consider all to be friends and had an experience about that. I'm very fortunate that I had the privilege to serve, and I'm very lucky my name's not on the wall. And every time people tell me something like welcome home, I'm a little embarrassed. It's a little personal. But I think there's something that you all can do, because I'm concerned about those 50,000 guys. And I think if you think like I do, every time you vote, you can do me a favor, because every time you vote, you're actually saying welcome home to someone who actually couldn't make it back here on their own. So please vote.
Thank you very much. And now, Republican Party candidate Dave Yaccarino will give his closing statement. Mr. Yaccarino.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this evening, North Haven TV and its staff. Again, a great job. My opponent, it was wonderful debating this evening, really. And the citizens of North Haven. I'm very proud of my record over the last 4 years. As I said in my opening statement, I work hard for you, and I should work hard for you. People are hurting. We've seen the largest tax increase in the history of our state over the last 4 years of $2.9 billion. That dramatically hurts the middle class and the working poor. Connecticut's still lagging in jobs. Compared to the rest of the country, we have the highest gas tax in New England, above 22 cents a gallon. Connecticut is one of only 2 states. I go to a lot of homeless shelters in New Haven and out of New Haven, veterans shelters and civilians shelters. Connecticut's one of only 2 states that poverty is growing and homelessness is growing, Connecticut and New York. And that's sad. And there's many reasons for that, but we really need to continue to address that. Connecticut, unfortunately, has had effectively one-party rule for 26 years in the legislature. We really need, our situation said, we really, really need to work hard together. I still have faith in each other. I bring a total different outlook to Hereford, a common sense approach. With this, I've gotten some things done. I hate to even mention it, but the fact is, I did some things, and I'm proud of this. Proud to work for the town of North Haven. I'm proud to represent the town. I brought back full funding 4 years in a row. Additional education money of $670,000 over the 4 years. The ADA grant for the town hall, that was myself and Senator Rosano in the town working together, of $675,000. $470,000 for the Public Works Garage. All this helps our tax base in North Haven. Money for Yaccarino Park, $127,000, and some after school program money at Montague's Playscape of $50,000. I worked very hard for veterans bills. I served in the military. Alden served in the military. It's very important. So many veterans come home and there's no jobs for them. So we passed a very good bipartisan bill last year, and I'm proud of that. Apprenticeship and other apprenticeship bills. I have a 100% voting record over 4 years representing North Haven. I've been committed constantly to education. I was endorsed by the CEA and the North Haven Education Association, along with the Independent Party. I am so proud to serve as your state representative. If re-elected, I will continue to strive to the most good for the most people, always being open, honest, and fair. fighting for common sense solutions, and for all people, for common good of one another. The most important endorsement, of all these endorsements though, the most important endorsement is the people of North Haven. Please go out and vote. Hopefully you'll consider me November 4th. It's been an honor and a pleasure for this debate this evening and also for serving the people of North Haven. So thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank our two candidates, Alden Mead and Dave Yaccarino, for participating in this forum. I'm Teale Caliendo, NHTV, and thank you for watching.
The League of Women Voters reminds us that democracy is not a spectator sport. We urge everyone to become informed and to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 4th. The regular polling places will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Live election night coverage begins after the polls close on NHTV.